I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought and died just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello and welcome to Season 33, Episode 22 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name's Jason.
Hi, Jason. Oh, my name's Vixie. It's my turn to talk now. My bad.
I'm Ingy.
I'm Riley.
And
We're a well-oiled machine.
I'm hosting today.
You had one job.
I'm hosting today because it's Mother's Day, which of course means Kimmy is sick as a dog and can't do anything fun. So that's a bummer. But here we are. We've got the episode today is what's your first step in creating a PC? We'll have a little chit chat about that. We've got emails, one from Rose. She wants to run Monster of the Week with less prep. And Byron, said it right, Byron in Bureaucracy observes why heroes usually win. If you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com or post in the mailbag channel on our Discord, which you can find at happyjacks.org/discord. The next game days is May 18th. Again, happyjacks.org/discord to find out more about that. But we host games online. It's for everybody all over the world for like 48 hours or something. It's just a little mini con that we run on our Discord every other month. It's awesome. So come and hang out. And actual local con GameX will be at Hilton LAX May 24th to 27th. That's one of the strategic cons that happens all year. And we will be doing our live show Saturday night there. And some guy called Jason will be doing a Demigod's book signing.
Ooh. Huh.
And Starscape is kickstarting in June. Visit goldenlassogames.com/Kickstarter to get notified, and you can see the game in action on Monday nights with our actual play, Outrunners. So happyjacks.org/Outrunners will get you all of that. Do tune into that stuff. It's a lot of fun. Our indie designer of the month for May is Stephanie Bryant, she, her. Stephanie is a queer, Emmy-winning game designer, writer, and professional GM. You can find all of her games on drivethrough.com if you search her name, and she is also on most social media as Mortaine, that's Mortaine, including Start Playing Games if you want to book her as a GM. That's, this week we are discussing her game, the Necronomazine.
There you go.
Yes,
Yep.
that's it. That's
We
the
got
one.
there.
Got it in one. This zine is a terrifying collection of scenarios and game content for you to use your eldritch horror games, all lovingly illustrated to fuel your dreams and nightmares. If you like Lovecraftian fiction, horror games, and unspeakable monsters that twist reality itself, you'll love this project. It includes Terror in the Berkshires, system-agnostic investigative horror scenario, Arachnophobia, a Fate of Cthulhu scenario, Eldritch Equipment, Strange Artifacts, and Miscellany. Dunmore's War is a system-agnostic eldritch horror scenario, The Rest of Monkey Anatomy and its uses, Strange Artifacts. And the digital edition now includes a small screen-friendly PDF. Keep some eldritch horror in your pocket. Find it by searching on DriveThruRPG, where the PDF is $5. Again, that's Stephanie Bryant is our indie designer of May.
Find some eldritch horror and put it in your pocket.
Yeah.
And let it get some rest.
Just like the old song says. Okay, so before we get to our mailbag today, we have a little chit chat that came up. I think this might have been brought up in Discord, but when you are coming up with a PC, you're going to play a character. So this is not NPCs, GMs. Just take your GM hat off and put it away. Is that your GM hat?
This is my everything hat,
It's
baby.
his good morning hat.
That's right.
He taps and goes, "Good morning to you."
Morning, ma'am.
I wear it for GMing and sixing.
And I'm all out of gamers. So,
All right. So, first thing you come up with when you're creating a PC, and anything. I mean, I know it's not the name, that's for sure.
sometimes it is.
Okay, not for me.
That can happen.
But reason why is I think of silly names for PCs sometimes. Like I'll think of like a lot of times the name for my PC is I just think of like a shipper name, like a portmanteau for a particular ship, and I make it like I had a PC named Thasmin because I'm a Doctor Who fan. I had Lumini from Owl House. But yeah, I think I'm a pretty versatile gamer, so I think I usually try to hear what other people at the table are thinking of for their characters, and a lot of times I'll think of like what I think like the gap is that they need to fill, so that'll be kind of what I do a lot of. Or yeah, I think like that, or if something from the system like makes me get inspired for a type of character, then that's what I kind of like follow whatever thread pops in my head, and then that's where I build my PC off of, like whatever is like whatever, either the system or the setting documents, whatever like the first spark I have is like the trail that I'll start going down.
Yeah, I also like to build the gap for the adventuring party, especially with newer players, where I want them to play the character that they've dreamed of, and then, you know, I'll play something else, but I can always, like, I'll be like, oh, okay, well, we need, this happened, a cleric.
Yeah.
Oh, well, nobody here even has, like, a hint of a healing spell. That's great. I'll be a cleric. And then, I can either lean into, like I made Grimsby, my dwarven cleric.
We love Grimsby.
Yeah, he's great. Or, I'll be like, well, okay, so what's very, very different from what you would expect? And so,
Yeah.
but that's if, like, if I'm playing with a group.
Yeah, see, I'm that guy that doesn't take any of that into account till after I've made the character. I pretty much go with a concept. Usually I'm like, cool, what am I interested in playing? What do I want to explore theme-wise? I have a very, because I'm a very role-play heavy player, so I like what's interesting to role-play, what's going to give me stuff to talk about in a role-play situation. And sometimes, I'll actually go through the classes and, kind of see, okay, which of these is interesting to me, for me to play, and then start building, a narrative off of that class. So, for example, if I'm looking at a paladin, I'm like, cool, maybe they're, a noble-born paladin who's, got this background and, this is their, and just kind of unwind a story around it, and then present that to the GM. Usually what I do is I'm the overachiever who creates 3 possible characters and hands them to the GM and goes, cool. So just in case a gap needs to be filled, I'm giving you options.
Yeah. I like to really vibe a character. If I'm just making a character and I don't have to think of anybody else, I like to vibe that character and just what is this thing that I want to do? I had one that took me forever to actually figure out who he was and what build he would be in D&D, and it was barbarian. Because he's a halfling who discovered this sword, and in a moment of panic of being hunted down, he made a deal with the dwarven hero inside the sword to finish its business on this planet in return for getting its strength so that he could fight these guys who were coming to kill him.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
it's also good flavor if you were doing a Hexblade Warlock.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I did, but I'm like, well, this isn't really
You don't have to.
it doesn't fight quite like he does, and I tried a couple other different builds too. I tried a Barbarian.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
that
Gotta like that.
is a terrible combination.
I mean, yeah. But it does have that a Scald kind of vibe to it, which is nice.
Yeah.
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 I decided I'd write a book about him instead.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Bumbletrue in the chat says my approach, what I haven't played before, and how I can wrap in my trademark traumas. And that's not far off from me either, especially if it's a system that I play a lot. If it's D&D, I have worked my way through almost every character type that I haven't already played.
Yeah.
I think the only one I have left is Ranger, which I'm just now building for another game. I mean, one shots here and there, but for an actual campaign. And because I did it once with Cleric, and Cleric ended up becoming my new favorite class.
Isn't it great?
Such a great class.
Yeah, I had been a bard true and true until I tried playing a Cleric. I'm like, oh my god, Cleric is so fun to play. It's so fun to role play. You can do such interesting things with it. So, but because I had that great experience with Cleric, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna stop ever being like, oh, I don't want to play this class, and I want to try every class in different ways. So, and when it's a one shot, it's the opposite of wrapping it in my own traumas. Instead, I think of a joke. I really do. Most one shots, I think of a silly, weird idea, and then I just run with that for the game. Unless it's like the tone wouldn't be okay for that. But yeah, if it's my friends and I'm goofing around with a one shot, I'm like, I might make a weird parody of a pop culture character, or I might make just like a pun of a name and go from there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I know we were already talking about I'm gonna see what everyone else is playing, and part of that is yes for me because it's no longer a question of what haven't I played after 35 years. It's I've hit every archetype, and it's like now how can I make it weirder? But at the same time, most RPGs, regardless of the system, from Shadowrun to D&D, is you want, if you're a player, if you're a main character, you want to be helpful to your group, right? Like you want to have a role to play, not just your character to play, but actually like in the course of like whatever the fiction is. It doesn't have to be fighting, but whatever the fiction is, you want to have something that feels effective.
You want to contribute.
Yeah, and like in a recent one, we were making Super Spies for this like home game thing I was in, and it was really fun. And everyone was like, "Yeah, I'm this guy, and I'm this guy, and I'm," you know, like they were coming up with all these like cool ideas that the book had. It was oh shit, it's like based on the Gumshoe system. I can't remember what this spy system is called. I bet somebody in chat will remember. But I was watching everybody like put their kind of specialties in place, and I realized like none of them were real good at shooting or driving. And I was like, this feels like a thing that happens in spy movies.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta have the guy in the car.
Yeah, exactly. The getaway driver.
Because
in the van. Yeah.
my instinct is always like the hacker, right? Like, and I never get to play the hacker, so I was like, oh, cool, I could probably be the hacker support guy in this because everyone else is gonna want to be the like.
You're already in the van hacking stuff. Now you drive the van too.
Yeah. Now I just figured everyone else would be shooting and driving and like doing all the cool shit, and so suddenly I had to come around with like, okay, so a driver, an action driver, and I don't want to go full Fast and Furious, you know. So I wanted to make them interesting.
You live life only in 8 mile at a time.
Right. So that was just an interesting little vignette of like, okay, how am I going to make this decision? Like, let everybody fill in their decisions. I'm like, okay, this is great. And what I like the aspect of restriction that gives me, because if I say, okay, well, if these 3 people are all doing computer shit, I'm just not going to. What would I do?
Yeah.
It's sort of like if somebody sends you a whole paint set and says, paint whatever you want. And you're a great painter, but they just say, paint whatever you want. Sometimes it's really hard to get started. But if they say, paint something and only use blues, like, oh, okay, that's an interesting challenge.
Yes.
Let me see what I could do with that.
Yeah, now I have some structure.
Right. I like the constraint of here's what everybody else is doing. I want to make something that works with those. What can I do to plug in and also make the most kissable character? Thank you, Rose, in the chat.
Yes.
Because I like characters to kiss when possible. The thing I do when I'm making a character is check in how many people at the table are interested in having characters kiss. Because if no one's into it, I like to know that ahead of time.
Yes.
Like, okay, I won't get my hopes up.
I'm
fine.
as
This is where my
digression,
expectations are.
I was running Thirsty Sword Lesbians on Monday, and I got everybody's lines and veils ahead of time, and one of the players had a hard red for PC romance, and I had to take him aside and go, we were at a setting where there's other tables happening.
Yeah.
I was like, if this is truly a hard no for you, you might want to move to a different table, because this game requires PC romance. Like it's half the rules in this game are PC romance. And luckily, he had actually built that Lines and Veils for a D&D game prior. He's like, no, I get what this is. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, go ahead. But that reminded me of this, like, that's a tough game to be. Nope, nobody can have romance at this table because it's a hard no for me. But that's the game.
Romance-centric game?
But that also brings up an argument or a thing that we got to a while back where we were talking about Lines and Veils, which is great. But I think it's also great for a game to essentially fill out its own Lines and Veils, but a reverse of like, this is a premises and ideas sheet of like, this shit's gonna be in the game.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, that's fine.
Yes.
Like there's not something wrong with you, but like this is gonna be a body horror character kissing game.
Yeah.
Not at the same time, but like These things are in the game.
Kissing body horror.
You know,
what? I watched True Blood. Those things are not mutually exclusive.
There
That
is
is
a such
true.
thing as
Yeah.
monster fuckers. I'm just saying.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Content warnings, I think, are.
Rose just put concepts.
Yeah, yeah.
That's like I've been listening to some other podcasts and
Wow.
some other people talk. I mean, it's this podcast,
Oh.
just not this one.
There are other podcasts.
Okay.
and
What?
and somebody was talking about like how they got to session 0 and like two of the people were like, well, I don't want anything to do with, and it was the central conceit of not just the campaign but the
Like theme of the game.
yeah, the actual game that they were playing. And it was like, how did you get to session 0 without pitching the game
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
Jason just did?
It's really interesting how many people, like, even if someone didn't pitch the game to me, I go out and look at the game and go, what is this about? Is this something that I want to play?
Right.
I will point out that I have a kind of an interesting approach to how I build PCs as well. Usually what I'll do is I will start with a concept and then I will go out because it's a game, right? We're not, unless you're doing it for stream, that's a little bit of a different scenario. But obviously, like, if you're building a game at home on the table, I start pulling characters to reference as personality things. So I have a character that was like, that I pulled a little bit of Zarya from Overwatch, for example, and I pulled like other characters that because it was a Dragonborn monk, and I wanted her to be like real buff and tough, and so I pulled those influences. Xena Warrior Princess was another one, just so that when I got to the table and we started playing, I already had like a tone for the character in mind, you know. And I also start playing with what they sound like just sitting in my shower, like building a voice helps you kind of build out that character and find the direction your character is going to go. Because I think there is prep that goes into building a PC, but you also have to remember that as you play the game, you're also going to learn about your PC.
Yeah,
in
you
the
want to have some
process.
room to grow.
Exactly.
And not like write a 10-page backstory document where, you know, going into session 0.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think, like, I'm not saying don't do that, but don't do that and expect everyone to know what's in it. And,
I'll write a lot of shit that nobody ever sees.
right.
Because I want to know what's going on in this person's
Yeah,
head.
but also know, like, you might get into something and realize, like, oh, this backstory isn't really serving what would be a cool moment here.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just going to line out this part and, you know, roll forward with this thing that now makes more sense.
Yeah.
One of the things I always tell my players is like, none of this is written in stone. So if we get 2 episodes in and you're like, he is way goofier than I thought he was, or, you know, any of that, you can change any of this and I'll go with it.
Yeah.
If I had my DM hat on, which we already said we're not going to do, but if I did, I usually give my players, like, after a few sessions or a few levels, depending on the system, I'll go, hey, everybody gets one chance right now to rebuild your character based on how you've been playing them. And, like, that's, like, I just give people that, like, especially for newer players who don't necessarily know the ins and outs of building a character and it's newer for them, I like to give them, like, one mulligan time. I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and do this. After this, you have to start spending things to get new points, like levels and stuff like that. But usually, like, if I'm playing, like, for 5e, for example, like, get to level 3 or 4, I'll go, okay, let's everyone rebuild your characters how you want to.
Yeah, I generally just say, like, if something's not working the way you want, just talk to me and we'll fix it.
Yeah.
But also, like, when I want to go deeper into character, that's when I start looking at what sort of themes do I want to use this character to explore, like things that I'm going through in my own life.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
What?
Oh, I said fucking, but I accidentally coughed over it. So,
Look, just because you had me fuck every NPC that came through our Pinnacles campaign.
yeah.
Wearing your sexting hat
fuck,
doesn't mean
Dallas and Houston and
Did we travel all around Texas?
yeah,
What?
basically. Angie did.
like Debbie and Dallas. I don't think so. I got the rest of the state.
Oh!
But
I
yeah,
also- yeah.
if I've been dealing with rejection, abandonment, you know, feeling other than, you know, like, you know, feeling like, you know, I have no family, like that sort of thing, you know, loneliness, then my character's probably going to go through that, and that's going to, that's going to inform my reactions to things and
Right,
how
the
I
choices you make.
talk. Yeah.
Yeah, like I have a character who is half elf in a world that doesn't like half elves.
Oh.
And we recently we encountered a little bit of that, and it was interesting because I was playing alongside a person who had been friends with this character for a long time, and we'd had a discussion about this. So that character made decisions based on what they knew about my character, and it led to a really interesting character-driven interaction.
That's cool.
So there are little things like that you can do as players as well when you start, like if you start building relationships, which is why I also like when you're building PCs, thinking about not just I hate the lone wolf archetype so very much.
Especially
It's
for
literally
a
like
game.
I love sitting down at a table, whether I'm GMing or even as a player. I'll sit down like who wants to build a relationship with my character? Can we
Yes,
talk
yeah.
about like how we knew each other before we walked into this room? Because the two things that I always find very hard to build off of that are very scenario specific are the lone wolf archetype and the y'all meet in a bar and
Yeah.
go on an adventure archetype.
Yeah.
It's much easier when you sit there and you're like, especially with new players too, it's so helpful to them to have an existing connection with a veteran player because now they have something to play with when they walk into that
I
session.
love all of these
know?
games that are coming out now that have like some built-in character questions
Yes.
of like character relationship questions.
Yes.
TV did it a lot,
Or,
which is great.
or if your game doesn't have that in it, there is this game that's any award-winning game called Decima.
Oh, I heard that one, the Golden Annie.
Yes. Okay, sorry, Kimmy.
So
I
is that
had
like,
to once.
like the R&D for your RPG? Is
Yeah.
that like what you would think?
Oh, yeah.
Check it out. Kimmy's gonna get mad if we keep going. But having those
like
character
Backstory
questions
Tarot.
are so useful. Like
Yeah.
it just like lights up everything, and it fills in like all the stuff I wouldn't have thought to fill in. You know, of
Yeah.
like, oh right, yeah, this is. Oh, what did you do that hurt my feelings? Oh, I have feelings now.
Yeah.
Okay, now I know who this
Yeah.
character is.
Yep.
And what I like about games, okay, we can talk about Decima and move on from it, but what I like about Decima is that we were talking about earlier about making characters. I'm one of those nerds, and I'm sure I'm alone in this group with this thought. I'm sure nobody else feels this way, where
Absolutely.
I just like making characters for fun.
How dare you?
And so,
How dare
a
you?
system that is like, oh, I can build characters, but also like going off what you said about looking through books for characters.
Yeah.
I will go on character sheet generators for multiple systems, just kind of like spend like an hour making a character sometimes.
Yeah.
Or when I am starting to think about a new character for a game, something I will also do is go on like a mini builder, like Hero Forge or something
Oh,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, that was like my D&D Beyond as well. And you just showed me the
Just
massive
the
list.
massive
Yeah.
scroll of
Yeah.
characters.
But I'll go on
Save it
Hero
while you
Forge
can.
and I'll just start building a mini, especially once I already have a nugget of an idea of what I want to build.
Yeah.
I'll start building a mini for that character because I feel like once I'm like, oh, what accessories do they have? Suddenly now I have like thoughts like,
Yeah.
oh, well, she has a pouch. What will be in that pouch? Like, oh, does she have a lucky pouch? Like, what's this going on?
Yeah.
yeah,
See, that's
I was
interesting.
on.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was on Hero Builder. This is real fast, and my halfling character I was talking about with the sword, the barbarian. I was looking for stuff for him to wear, and there's a thing where he just has a pot on his head, and I'm like, that's
Yes,
perfect.
Yeah.
He's a halfling. He loves food. So.
I
I'll look
like-
for pit crews that have like.
I like reading comics, actually, so I'm constantly thinking of like character tropes. Like I'll just be sitting there thinking, I was like, it'd be really cool to write a story about this character. And then I've, for a great example of this is I play a wizard named Cameron in another game. And Cameron has a little bit of a Howl's Moving Castle vibe. But the reason he came about is actually because I was getting ready to write a comic. I thought it'd be a really fun story to write a comic about this this guy who practices magic, but and does fortune telling, but it's fake fortune telling.
Love it.
And then I put him into the D&D game as a wizard/mystic.
Love it.
Who is the worst wizard ever. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like how I got I come up with ideas. Like I have I put a thumbprint on a concept, and then a campaign happens, and I pull that concept and fit it to
Yeah.
the archetype of the world, depending on what's going on. It's also why another big thing of mine when I'm building PCs, I'm a self-proclaimed lore whore. If you're a GM and you've put the time and effort into writing lore, give me all of it. There's a reason that I played a knowledge cleric in my first campaign. I wanted all of my GM's lore.
How much of the Aldgate website have you read?
I've read it once cover to cover, and I'm still going through it. So you're welcome.
AldgateRPG.com.
Yes.
That's a Benny.
I know. Thanks. Thursday, I'm getting to Benny.
Yeah,
But
that is our Thursday live stream, everybody. It's
right.
Aldgate Adventures and using the Savage Worlds rule set. You should
Yes.
check that out.
But yeah, I think that also note a big part of building that PC is fitting your PC into the world the GM is creating.
Yes.
If Aldgate's a great example because
That's-
Aldgate's
yeah.
a 17th century pirate world situation. What was it? What did we we
And
call it?
musketeers. Musket punk.
Musket punk. That's
like
the word
that.
I'm looking
Yeah.
for. So it's like a musket punk world. Think like Three Musketeers, all of that.
Some Clockwork
How does your
stuff.
and the question you have to ask yourself is how does my character fit into this world? Because the nice thing is Engi's done a great job of like here's the different aspects of this world. Here's different sex you can associate with your sexes and like sections, not the other one. I play a courtesan in that game, so I can get confused easily. Anyway, so the point being is you have options for who to connect yourself with, and then you can build more story based on those connections, which is a really cool thing that I feel like it creates a more immersive experience for you as a player when you step to that table as well. I might actually be a knowledge cleric in real life. Maybe.
My favorite shift from that was, I think this was back in 3.5 as well. And I started out, I had read Knowledge Cleric. I was like, this is cool, but Cleric has a lot going on. And then flipped a little bit and found Paladin. I was like, what about a Knowledge Paladin? And boom, suddenly I had this half-orc baby, was left with the Knowledge Church, and was growing up. It was like, I'm big and strong. And like, I don't like reading that much, but I want to protect books. And I'm going to go find the books, and I will bring them back.
And I will protect them with my body and my soul.
Yes. And the idea of being the bodyguard of books, which honestly is so in my heart anyway.
Yeah.
So good. It's like from UHF when it's Conan the Librarian.
Yeah.
Well, I totally forgot about that. That is right in
Or
there.
is that states?
That was
one of those
UHF,
two? Okay.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
both have like the fake. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I like as a member of a marginalized community is I feel like a lot of times when I'm making a character for a game, I just kind of think about like, oh, what is the genre or setting of this game, and what is something I never get to see characters of in that setting or that genre. So like whenever I'm playing like in a period piece or you know even like almost anything, like it's so rare you see even queer people in most genre things that are mainstream.
Yeah.
Comics, yes. Books, yes. But like movies and TV shows, it's still like you hear assholes online talk about it. It's like, oh, it's every scene, but half the time we're not there at all.
Right.
And especially trans people, especially good representation of trans people. So a lot of times for me, it's just like, oh, what's a fun way? Like if I'm like when we were doing a historical one recently, I was like playing a character from the 20s from during Prohibition, and I looked up and found out that a lot of speakeasies had been previously queer bars that had become speakeasies for everybody else.
Yep.
I was like, cool. So like, yeah, there were trans people in that time period. They weren't called trans people, and they had different lives than what would happen now. But like, let's lean into that. Let's find out more about that. And
Yeah.
like, now you have a character idea. And similarly, like you're talking about like the half-elf thing. And for me, like half-elves have always spoken to me as a trans person as like, oh, it's someone who lives in between two worlds and doesn't like quite fit into one or the other. And like, so I'll either do that or for that same reason, I love playing goblins a lot because I feel like goblins are always like mistrusted where they go. They're easily recognizable right away. So I always like to find fun ways to use goblins for things, like kind of like off your barbarian thing.
Yeah.
I played a goblin blade singer one time, and the whole premise was that she had been raised by somebody who believed that did not believe in like racial
Only elves can be blade
yeah.
singers.
Yeah.
Then
and like eugenics stuff like that. So they like this professor was like, I'm going to teach this young goblin to be a blade singer, and she was really good at it.
Yeah.
And then like there was institutional racism that worked against
Yeah.
her, and like
Yeah.
someone gave her a cursed sword that when she went for her trials she couldn't stop fighting, and then like, oh, she once her aggression gets in, she can't do it.
Oh, yeah.
And that was her backstory. So the rest of the story was just her being an adventurer who was a skilled blade singer, but no one would take her seriously. And
Wow.
it was super fun
It's
to play.
interesting that
That's
you
amazing.
say that because like as a POC too, I actually there's a character that I play. She's a Circle of Stars druid. I love her. Her name is Najma. Najma is actually a social justice warrior, and she has dedicated her entire life to getting rid of the stereotypes of races that have been called evil. So
Oh,
she's lived
yeah.
with orcs. She's lived with a tribe of goblins, and part of her backstory, spoilers for anyone who watches this game, but part of her backstory is the fact that she had actually started living with goblins for quite some time to learn about their culture and to find out like, oh, what are they like? Why are their lifespans so short? Why are they so warlike? Why do they have these habits? And there was a party of adventurers who thought they had taken her captive and killed the entire village. Najma wild shaped into a Circle of Stars form and annihilated them out in sheer like fury.
Yeah.
And that informs like how she plays in the game. And I was like, what happens when you're in that situation where you're the advocate, but like you're trying to do it the right way?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's always fun to do that. Conversely, I also have a Kalishtar rogue named Tivuli who has been ostracized from her race because she's broken.
Oh, God.
Because she ended up in a magical situation that messed with her connection to the other half of her soul.
Oh.
Yeah.
And like, so Kalishtar, even her parents abandoned her. She was actually raised by a halfling because they could not deal with the fact that she went from like that super meditative disciplined state that Kalishtar have to live in to almost sounding insane because she has to talk to herself to communicate with the other half of her because she can't do it anymore, based on her circumstances. And it's just, it creates these interesting dynamics when you do them right.
Yeah.
But you also have to handle that with sensitivity,
Of course.
as well. And that requires open dialogue with your GM.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yes,
So.
I've been doing character questionnaires for decades, and it started out like my old gaming group in the 90s, which was awesome, but we played Champions at first, and they were like, oh, you get like experience points if you fill out this questionnaire, and it's like 50 questions, and it's a bunch of stupid shit, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, I'm going to pare this down to like 5. And, like, who do you love? Who can I kill that would make you mad? Not actually that, but it's
Not
like
the same person we're then.
yeah, who do you love? But also, like, one of the biggest questions is like, why did you leave home? Why are you out here doing this
Right.
absolutely insane thing of adventuring?
Yeah.
And so, like, asking myself that question for Joffer Rumblebelly, my halfling barbarian, like, why did he leave home? And it was like, well, because he never felt at home, even amongst his family. And what everything that had been kind of like promised, like, oh, if you do this, you do this, and then, you meet the person, you get married, and you go on, you live, and like all of that didn't like taken away, or not really taken away, but it like didn't happen. And he was disenchanted with all of the lies that he grew up on. And so he went out and he started, just meeting other people and getting stories and guiding them. And that's how eventually he guided the wrong people across this thing and
Nice.
had to defend himself. Yeah.
Yep.
So
I think questionnaires are great, even if you don't end up having the GM read them. 'Cause I think the questionnaires often force you to like really start, even when they're like just silly questions. It just makes you start to think about your character as a 3-dimensional being as opposed to just
a
like,
character sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also talking with the GM, I think the most productive when I'm character building and I have that concept and I'm putting together the character sheet, having like a one-on-one with the GM can sometimes really help. I'm not saying that all GMs have the time to do this. I'm just saying like that's why I bother you all the time. But yeah, so like if you're like as just coming from that standpoint, having that open dialogue really helps kind of fine tune your character. This is like in the final stages of like really polishing that character sheet of like going, okay, these are like the aspects that I want to explore. Because one of the things with my knowledge cleric, my very first D&D character that I talked about with my GM at the time was I was really fascinated by the idea of a cleric worshiping the wrong god but still having cleric powers. And so we created this idea that she had actually manifested powers that were similar to another god and was adopted by a cult. And I also wanted to explore religious abuse because this was during a time where I was reading a lot about camps and places that kids were sent to where they suffered these kinds of things. And I was like, I really kind of want to look at this. And we talked about like how to explore that in a way that is obviously sensitive and informed. But it's really interesting the dynamics that came out of that conversation because it not only helped him build the world, but it helped me build the character too.
Yeah.
And it informed how I played her because she had suffered so much abuse and trauma so young. I play her as an incredibly anxious person. Like her superpower is her anxiety. She is constantly terrified. There is never any point in time where she is not terrified. She does not believe in herself. She has internalized a lot of self-hatred. This was another Kalishtar character. So basically she has a lot of self-hatred towards herself. about what she is. Not to get too deeply into it, but these are the kinds of decisions that you open yourself up for. And it's just to me it's like there's so many more options than just the lone wolf archetype if you just think hard enough, you know?
Yeah.
Before I think we could probably talk about this for hours.
Yeah,
We should get to our
100%.
mailbag.
If we haven't already.
Before we move on, why don't we just go around and like, the question boils down to what's the first thing you come up with, right? We've had I really like all these ideas, but what do you think you would list as like, okay, I have to sit down and make a new character because I'm in this game. What is your first step?
Pick a feature.
Like a physical feature?
Like pick any feature. Pick a class, pick a personality type, pick a name, and then just start building off of that.
Okay.
Who is this person?
Yeah.
Who is this person in the world? And how do they show up in the world? Like, I don't think about classes or anything to start with. I think about like the person that I want to play. And then I go like, oh, well, that could fit into this.
Yeah.
I would say that I would look at what the genre of the game is, and then I would think of what I think are the main archetypes of that genre and like characters I like within that genre, and then I think like what would be my take on that archetype, and that's what I would go from there. I think devoid of all other things like what gaps for filling, stuff like that. I think that's how I would most likely get into it. Like,
yeah.
Like if I'm playing a Star Trek game, I'm like, what is a character that I would like to see more of in Star Trek, or like what's my spin on Star Trek, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And onward from there.
Yeah, and I mean, not to just jump on the thing that we all liked, but like, I actually can't get started making the character until I know what everyone else is making.
Yeah.
At least somewhat, you know? And that's my first step, I think, usually is, well, okay, what is everybody else doing? I'll slot in somewhere. Because then I could check things off and have my only paint in blue, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But
well, and also, I got burned in the past with it because one of my first actual plays on a stream, I was told by the DM that it was going to be this like film noir, dark kind of thing. And so I took that information and I made a very like morally gray, femme fatale kind of character, and I really based her on like the detectives in a film like noir movie or whatever. She was a brothel owner who like traded in secrets. Like I made this very kind of like that kind of character. And nobody else made characters that were that morally gray. Everybody else made like very it was Ravnica, so they're like guilds and stuff. Everybody else made very like guild loyal, like chaotic, like lawful good, like, which is great. But they're all playing lawful good. I'm playing chaotic.
and that's where we have to like make characters as a group.
Yeah.
You know, like that's so hard to do.
Those
And I always
relationships
felt
come in.
off. We made a good story out of it eventually, and we worked on it. But I always felt like the odd one out of that table, and I felt like I was like occasionally like accidentally disrupted to the game because I'm like, this was the marching orders that I was given when I built this character, and because we didn't sit down as a group and play, especially when you're doing it for a stream,
there's got to be that offline, even
offline
pre-session
conversation.
zero of like, hey, this is our sort of goal and you know, trajectory. Let's make sure we're all in formation, if not, you know, identical, but you know.
Because like even the lone wolf example you brought up a couple of times, which I agree with you 100%. That's a bad archetype for. In general, I mean, look, anything can work in the right hands, but it's not a great archetype when it's specifically for a communal game, like a TTRPG.
Right.
But like a great example of it that I won't even use my own example, I'll use the one that my example is based off of. If you watch The Witcher, like, or read The Witcher books, like, Geralt is a lone wolf character at the beginning.
Right.
But over the course of all the versions of the stories, he gets Yennefer and he gets Ciri. He even gets, you know, Dandelion or Yesker, depending on which version you listen to. But he it's a found family. Batman is a good example too. Batman, like one of my biggest frustrations with Batman in films is they keep putting him back to being billionaire playboy lone wolf Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Whereas in the comics, he has a whole bat family, and it's been that way for decades. And I think like that's so if you want to build like a lone wolf character, the approach has to be until they meet the other characters.
Right.
And
And
I
they
think
stop being a lone wolf.
I use that example specifically for that reason because a lot of people think lone wolf and don't think like that.
Right.
Yeah.
They end up going, that means I don't have to socialize with anybody. I can just do my own thing and do whatever I want. And that defeats the point of playing in a TTRPG.
100%.
No, your character was a
I
lone
wasn't
wolf.
saying it to argue with you. I was building what you were
No,
saying.
I'm just
To be
making
fair.
my point. Like
for
I'm clarifying the example. I
Just
wasn't going to argue.
answer the question,
I was building
why are you no longer a lone wolf?
Right.
Yes, exactly, because it's up to the player to go along with the party.
Because the problem with lone wolves, you get so many times you get those. Well, this is how my character's written, and it's like, well, that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, you
Like,
can rewrite that.
In my old champions group in the 90s, it was like, oh, I want to play like this sort of character, and they just said that sort of character doesn't work in a role-playing game.
Yeah.
Pick something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, all right, I'll do the exact opposite of Wolverine.
Yes. Yeah.
Personality-wise.
Yeah, like that's why the like archetype is actually lone wolf and cub. There's very rare stories that are just lone wolf. Like almost every lone wolf is lone wolf and cub, or lone wolf and eventual found family. Like
Bumbletrue said it well. Well, lone wolf arc is typically about making connections.
Yeah.
It's about
Right.
this lone wolf opening up and kind of embracing that part of themselves. I will say this, something interesting that I noted is that if you put each of our one things together, you have a step-by-step guide of creating an effective PC.
All right.
Look at that list real quick.
we should probably get to our mailbag.
Sure.
And I think
Yeah, read it up, mailbag.
I think Riley wanted to go first.
I did because it's from our friend, and it's from somebody who's on the channel. So.
Yes, and I think in chat right now.
Yes,
So,
and in chat talking about how much people like to kiss their characters.
yes.
By the way, I like that she wrote, "This is long one's drink now while you can," and my can is empty.
I know, mine too.
Let me get those
I'm a
few
nervous
drops
drinker.
of hydration.
You want something
Oh,
from
I
the
would
fridge
love
while
it.
you're
If there's
reading?
a Coke Zero in there that's not cherry, I would love that. Or if not,
I
it's
think there's a
Spindrift
regular
I think
Coke
there's
Zero.
both,
We
yeah.
got both.
Thank you. Mailbag 1. This is a long one, so drink now while you can. Hello, Jason. I put brackets around the word Kimmy, and the Fellowship of Happy Jacks.
Dun, dun, dun,
Thank you. Oh, wow, I got both options.
You're welcome.
I'm going to need them both. Just so you know, I was just given 2 beverages, which is going to be important, because let's just give you all, those of you who are watching and those of you who are listening, it is 2 full pages of notes. So, all right. It is I, Queen of the Discord, Mecha Maniac, occasional host, and General Menace, Rose. I am writing you, my illustrious colleagues, for advice for running Monster of the Week. The backstory. I put together a group of players for an in-person game after recruiting them from my work's role-playing game night, going 3 months strong at time of writing with a record attendance of 23 people. Michael
yeah.
Jordan of gaming.
go.
This will be my first. That Michael Jordan joke was mine, not Rose's. So don't blame her for that. This will be my first in-person game aside from my work in about 4 years. Aside from my work in about 4 years, and only my second swing at running Monster of the Week. I'm very excited about running a game in person again, but I'm a bit worried about the system. Anyone who shared a table with me or honestly even spoken with me knows that I have ADHD. In gaming, I can't believe it.
Whoa.
I struggle with tasks that don't activate the reward centers in my brain, and this previously has made designing monsters and mysteries for MLTW very difficult. I've identified some of the factors that ended my previous attempt at running MLTW. I bogged myself down in world building, I was worried about being original, and I was holding myself to some very unreasonable standards because I wanted to impress my players. Just gonna make a note real quick here, because I have a thought about that. All right. I think I've managed to divest some of those bad habits, but I worry about the meat and potatoes of actually running MLTW, the monsters, and the mysteries. I think I might be able to get away with modifying published monster stats to suit my needs. Yes, you can. But coming up with mysteries is pretty daunting. My usual style of GMing, particularly with masks, involves throwing an issue at the players with no particular expectation about how they handle it, and usually through play and dice rolls create a fun story around it. However, it seems like MLTW demands much more preparation, monster stats, weaknesses, behaviors, countdowns, named NPCs and motivations. It all feels a bit overwhelming to prepare, especially when both the game and my own GMing style says not to railroad your players along a predestined track. So, I turn to you fine gamers and game masters. Can I run this game with less prep? If not, how do I make preparing both fun and useful? How do I make preparing both fun and useful for when I actually sit down to run the game? I dread the situation where you prepare an entire dungeon or town in D&D that your players never visit. And I also worry about preparing so little that the mystery loses all coherence or is unsatisfying to solve. Thanks for listening to me ramble. Stay queer, stay weird, stay diverse. Yours, Rose. P.S. I don't know if it's ever announced in the show, but I now run my work's role-playing game night. I think it was announced earlier in this letter.
Email.
Yeah.
Which is going strong and has created a wonderful space for queer gamers in my community.
Yay!
PPS! I ran my first in-person con games back in April. I brought the light of masks, a new generation, to a convention full of 5e and Pathfinder tables. PPS, drink. PPPPS. I think this is getting excessive now, and that is the end of the letter.
Woo! That was a good letter.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was.
Really
Great
good.
letter. Should all drink though.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm out.
We were ordered.
Jason got you 2 and me none, so thank you.
He
File
doesn't-
flavored.
He doesn't. He doesn't deserve good things.
God.
I think another
You're not
drink,
wrong.
have something different.
No, I'm fine. I'll
So,
play Monster of the Week.
The advice is drink.
Or
No, it is not the actual advice.
Monster of the Week
So-
is very tough for this. I will say I get real. I don't actually run it for this reason because Monster of the Week is very much based on Monster of the Week style shows like Buffy and stuff like that. But a lot of the game is people hunting a specific monster, and part of the premise of the game is they pick up clues as they're hunting it, that then when they finally confront the monster, they bring those clues
Okay.
together. So it's almost like building a puzzle that lasts over the course of a hunt.
right.
And I'm also not very good at that. That is a tough thing for me. It's very hard for me to conceptualize like how to build the monster with clues that get dropped over the course of the story. So I also struggle with this. This is actually a reason why I don't run this particular game. So
Yeah.
I play it, but I don't run it.
mysteries are really hard to run.
Yeah,
Right.
it's actually something that I think Gumshoe does so well that I just learned recently.
Gumshoe's great.
Because, like, yeah, there are some like action skills you would roll dice for, but other ones it's like, oh yeah, you have 4 points in that. Yeah, spend a point. Here is the information. There's no roll, right? And it's because if you don't get that information, the story grinds to a halt.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
It's the rule of the game is if you are in the right place to get this information, I have to give it to you. Like that, because there it is, and you are an expert.
Yeah.
Something that I wrote into one of my videos at Dungeoneer
Yep.
show on
Oh,
YouTube.
snap.
Also check out.
New video tomorrow. Is that like surprised me, and I'm like, this is a really good piece of information that I didn't realize I do. Is I don't lock that information behind one NPC.
Yeah.
Yes.
I let the players go out and they go like, oh, you know who we should ask is we should ask such and such a person. And I go,
Correct.
that sounds reasonable.
Yes. Yeah.
And they go out and they ask that person, and then you don't make them roll
Right.
because suddenly I have this note that and now I can't give you because you rolled a 1 or whatever.
Right.
And they go and they ask that information, you do a little scene, and then boom, there
Right.
it goes.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
if you do want to have a roll, there is some stuff in Monster of the Week where you could roll. But Monster of the Week, if I recall, mostly says, okay, well, if you roll poorly, you get the clue and this person hates you, or they're gonna fight you, or you know, like whatever. You got your information though, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what I think PBTA mostly does well.
Yeah, a lot of
is-
PBTA it's not a fail roll; it's a downbeat to the story.
Right.
Like you're not failing; you're just not getting a success.
It's just getting
score.
more complicated.
Yeah.
Hence complications.
Yep.
I will say this. I'm just thinking about the prep as someone who tends to over prep when they GM. A lot of times, if I were to run this as a one shot, usually what I do just to maximize how quickly I can set it up is to give myself hard numbers, usually low numbers. So, like, if I'm setting this up as a one shot, 2 clues, boom, there you go. And they don't, again, the beauty of being a game master is the fact that nobody knows what the plan is except you.
Yep.
So if you're ad-libbing on the fly, if you're like, oh, well, you know, they're in the right area at the right time, they can find this clue. It doesn't matter what they do. They're going to find the clue. They just get to feel special because they did the thing that got them the clue. The other thing that I like to do too is if they roll low, again, you have the complications in PBTA, yes, but you also aren't obliged to give them all the information. You can encourage them to hunt for that, like, one extra thing that they need, that maybe that thing that they need isn't crucial to them solving the mystery, but it'll give it that much more flavor. It doesn't have to be crucial either.
Yeah.
And that way your prep is simplified because you're like, cool, I only have to think of 2 clues and 1 NPC. Boom, done. And all of that, name generators and stuff like that. Also, going back to your point, when you're having trouble prepping for something, especially if you're just playing like at a meetup or nothing where you're going to get sued for copyright violation, go look at Buffy. Go
Yeah, that is
reference
true.
the show. Look
Yeah.
at what they did and just take that or a variation of that. Nothing saying you have to use the same idea, but you can derive inspiration from it.
And episode
you know?
synopses are fine. You don't have to wade through hundreds of hours of TV.
Exactly.
Unless you want to.
Like Rose mentioned here, they publish monsters for this system, so
Yeah.
you can just go to those monsters and look at them, or you can go to the
Es-
monster manual for D&D,
Especially
and
for your
modify
first
it.
couple
Yeah.
mysteries. I mean, the nice thing about published Monster of the Week monsters is they're going to say, here are the clues you should have. Here's how they should get those clues, et cetera, et cetera. And then you could kind of work that into your town. One thing that was on my mind about this is how much experience these players have. Because it seems like, okay, they got involved in the work RPG sessions. Have they been to a couple? Did they play D&D one time and now they want to play more stuff and Monster of the Week sounded cool? Or have they played a whole bunch and now they want to try Monster of the Week? And that matters to me because there's an in-between section where we're like, yeah, okay, they go to the train yard and they ask the, hermit who lives in the hut there. But
The hut.
like, okay, so they're going to get the information. But then the thing that you have to balance with that, and I know would be in the back of my mind, is I want to, like, if failure isn't on the table, then what are the stakes? Right? And
Right.
and if you're like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to get the answer, and then the next thing's going to happen, then it doesn't matter what I do. Right?
And that feels like railroad.
Yeah.
Right.
That's-
And so whether that's railroading to success or failure doesn't really feel good because if you succeed, like, woo, what did
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
So finding that balance is so critical and like making sure that a bad roll, like if we're rolling for something, that it actually matters. And is doing something to the story. It's
Yes.
the monsters finding out about them, which is one of the bad roll results in Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
That it's sending henchmen. It's learning about them. Like they go home and now there's somebody waiting in their apartment. Like
Yes.
actually having that kind of stuff is what Monster of the Week prep looks like.
Yeah. Or like a downbeat could be if you're trying to talk to somebody about the monster and you roll poorly, you could have tipped this person off that there's a monster, and now you've got like angry villagers or terrified people in the
Yeah.
town. Like you set off a panic in the town now. Like it's like that's a
Yeah.
way you could. Like,
Yeah.
There's ways that there can be consequences for your rules that aren't. I don't get the information that I need.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I think for one shots especially, we talked about railroading a couple times, and I think it was mentioned in the article. I don't know if I've coined this phrase or if this is like one I picked up somewhere, but I think like instead of railroading, approach it like a trackless dark ride. Like there's only one destination, there's only really one set of rooms, but the players don't know it because they're free floating through a
Yeah.
setting.
Yes, exactly.
And especially one shots especially, like you said, they don't know where it's gonna go. So like you don't need to prepare every location in the town. You need to prepare like one location that you can easily swap to be a different location if
Yeah.
somebody asks.
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
like and pick a town where like if someone says, "Oh, we're gonna go to the police department," you can vaguely understand what a PD is gonna look like. It's
Yeah.
gonna have a couple of jail cells, a desk,
Right.
or whatever. If they say we're gonna go to the tavern, you can take a picture of what like a small town bar is gonna look like. You don't have to have built that map out. Like, yeah,
The other thing,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and when I'm building a mystery, I don't know about this game in particular, but
Building a mystery.
I
It's just right
I will build it backwards. So you go like, okay, well, we got the monster. Now what's the last clue to get to the
Right,
monster, and then what's the previous one, and from
Yeah.
one to the next.
I will
Reverse.
also say don't discount the value of having a timer because timing something will give not just stakes but give a sense of urgency to the players.
Yeah.
Like one of your negative things would be like, oh, well, you just lost a day doing this and now you're one day closer to this monster making an appearance
Light a
or
fire under
somebody
their
else
asses.
dying, whatever the consequences will be for that
Yeah, that's
monster encounter.
built into Monster of the Week. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've looked at it, but like
I have never played Monster of the Week.
it's built right.
So-
You just like read the rules of the game.
Awesome. Don't discount that. I mean, I've used them for other games before
Yeah.
as a way because I understand that like that balance is important. Like you don't want your players to feel like, well, it doesn't matter what I do. The thing's gonna happen regardless.
Yeah.
You want to give, even if you know the outcome, you don't need your players to know that. You want your players to be invested in the game and having a good time.
Yeah.
And a timer is a great way to do that because now they're like, oh no, we've got to, especially if it's like an escape room situation, like we got to do this thing before or like negative stuff's gonna happen,
The thing I would add to that though, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm not saying what you're saying. There's two things about a timer is one, make sure your players are really clear that you've marked off a timer.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, hey
That's
gang,
communication.
this roll went really poorly. It took you way longer to do this thing. I'm putting one on the clock. And just so you know, there's a clock.
Yeah.
Right? And let them know there are 6 wedges on the clock or whatever, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is don't put out a real world timer with like a running timer on your phone.
Oh, no, don't do that.
At your
No.
table. People take different times to process information and think about stuff, and that's just a shitty thing to do.
Yep.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. No, the way that I approach timers is actually with dice. Usually what I'll have is like I'll have whatever appropriate dice. So usually my timers are D6 timers, so I'll put a D6 on the table. Let the people know, like, look, I have a D6 out. It starts at 6. Once we hit 1, this thing might happen. So, and then I just start ticking down. So every time they see me flip that die, that starts creating that
That's
sense
good
of
stuff.
urgency
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
That's
You
a great
know?
way to do it.
The only time I agree with you overall about the ticking timer as a real timer vibe, I will say that I did use one in my Doctor Who game that I did. But again, it was for a podcast, so it's for an audience. We were trying to keep episode lengths down. So it's not the same thing as playing for your after work group, like
Right.
that's
Yeah.
right. But that was mostly because that is a system that is much more lending itself to splitting the party.
Sure.
And so it was less of a, you only have 5 minutes to solve this problem, and more of like, okay, when 5 minutes are up, I'm going to cut to the other group. And it was presented more like, you know how on TV shows, like you might cut from one scene to the other scene
Sure.
and back.
Yeah.
So like there are reasons to do it, but like obviously you're not saying like you have 5 minutes to solve this problem, but it's like in 5 minutes we're taking a break from you and coming back to
Right.
you after this person's had a chance to play.
That's much
But-
more doable.
Yeah.
I hear about stuff like there was something recently where somebody was like, yeah, I fixed initiative, and I just give everybody 2 minutes to take the turn, and if they don't
Yeah.
do it, I move on to the next person. They lose their turn.
That's
I was like, my
Yeah.
dude,
That's standardized testing. No, don't do
yeah,
that.
I get where that's coming from, and it's frustrating when somebody's taking a long time, but you need to have a grown-up conversation with the people who are taking too long
Yeah.
outside of game and work that shit out. Like that is not that is some like bullshit childish stuff to do.
And also, if you're limiting everybody ahead of some people with less than 2 minutes, you're actually cutting out the time they could have spent preparing their move when it was their turn.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if someone's a spellcaster, they might need a couple of minutes to
Right.
think about their spells. And if they're like eighth, if they're like, well, maybe it's a big combat. If they're eighth in the order, if you've now only given them 16 minutes, like they might, but like they might not have a chance to flip through everything.
Yeah.
If you give somebody like chance for someone else, okay.
I just like saying that when we start talking about timers, there's a specific thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
PBTA clocks are a whole thing that are worth looking into, but it's not putting a clock on the table.
Yeah. Don't
Yeah.
do that to people. It's
Don't
very
use clocks as a
stressful.
punishment.
Takes the
Right.
fun out of the game. Yeah.
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 I did want to talk about something else that I read in this email. Worrying about being original and holding yourself to unreasonable standards. Here's the secret to being a GM. Nobody's gonna know.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. It doesn't matter. It's gonna be great no matter what. Just as long as you know that all roads lead to Rome. Just have your goal. This is what I want my players to do, and whatever way they take is gonna get them there. And you can be as creative as you want getting them there. They're all gonna have a good time as long as you're doing your job right, obviously. You know, and by that I mean your players are having fun. You're not like creating stressful situations by setting 2-minute timers for them, for example, you're fine. The beauty of collaborative storytelling is the fact that you're telling a story together. It's a collaborative experience. It's not just you. All you're doing is laying out a skeleton for the players to fill in with their details. And that's how collaborative storytelling works. So always keep that in mind. You're gonna be fine as long as everybody has fun. That's the goal.
Yeah,
That's why it's a game.
I want to point out Rose in the chat, who wrote this letter. Rose just said in the chat, I have a piece of advice to give to other GMs, which is steal. And it's like, Rose, we are talking to you.
Yes.
About
It's not you. The
but
call's
also,
coming from inside the house.
I want to say with Monster of the Week, to build off what you're saying, yes, collaborative storytelling, but also, and building off of that, people play Monster of the Week because they want to play games that are like the shows they want. I know you know, Rose.
Yeah, it's a trope. It's a trope.
Like, people play Monster of the Week because I play Monster of the Week because I love Buffy and I want to
Yeah.
play Buffy.
Right.
And also, like, the thing about collaborative storytelling that I want to build from what you said, that's such a good point, is like, no two groups of people are going to play the same scenario the same way.
Right.
And so even if you completely steal something, like you could take the adventure that is like that's been in some actual play podcast that they created or shows or a TV show you watched or a movie. You could put people at the beginning of that story and give them scenes that start out in a story and just do like a quick skin face and no one will know that's not the same thing. And they won't go the same
Yeah,
direction.
it'll
that
turn out
everybody
different.
else
Yeah.
did.
Oh yeah, I'm running an adventure on Thursday nights from 7 to 10 p.m. on the Happy Jacks RPG network called Aldgate Adventures. And it is an adventure that I have run now. This is, I think, the 6th or 7th time that I've run it. And it's never the same twice.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, it just flew right out of my head. What was the thing you started talking about?
Collaborative storytelling.
Oh,
and
yeah,
how
yeah.
it's a community
So
experience.
without any cynicism in this, this does not make me sad at all to acknowledge that every story has been told.
Yeah.
And it's just how you tell it. That's
Yeah.
why we keep telling stories, is there's a new way to tell the story, and it doesn't matter that it's been told. If you're straight up fucking ripping off Frankenstein, you know what? It's a cool ass story, and there's a
Yeah.
reason it's been around for so long.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know,
If you're obsessed with your new way of doing it, it's
Yeah.
probably going to be awesome.
yeah.
Yes.
And everyone's gonna have fun, even if they figure out it's Frankenstein and the movie The One exists in this world. Like, it's still gonna be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there were 2 different Frankenstein films that came out in the last 6 months, and one was great and one was terrible. I'm not going to say which one I think is which, but like they're vastly different from each other as well.
Sure.
I also
There's a Sean Bean series a couple of
Right.
years ago, like during the pandemic, I watched it and I was like, why am I not hearing about this? This is awesome.
Right.
Or
And
you
I
have
know-
like Frankenweenie, which is Frankenstein but with a dog.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know that Rose already said that this was stuff that she had already taken out of her issues, like previous attempts, and she's working on it. But I want to point this out about bogging myself down with world building. That's the one that I noted while I was reading it. One of the joys of a PBTA game is you don't have to bog yourself down with world building. You can actually do it with your players at the start of the game.
Yeah.
You can literally sit down and go, what is this town? Where are we? What do you have? Every player pick a thing in the town. Have it like when I played Monster Hearts. The first time I ever played Monster Hearts, the GM, and maybe it's just the way the game is set up. I've only played it, I haven't run it, but the GM put us in a classroom and was like, who's sitting at this desk?
Yeah.
Who's sitting at this desk? Oh, who has a crush on this person? Who is this person? Like, and then we built the whole classroom out, and then we started playing the game. And
Yeah.
I think like that's a way you can like, instead of over prepping, just prepare a like half hour of time
Right.
in your game where you're building the city.
Right.
The
And
over prepping is my happy place.
Well, every game is going to be different. Like, for example, I run games at Strategicon as part of the Story Games LA group, and one of the things that I do, because I'm sitting down at a table with all new players, like people are going to sit down to play a game, you don't know who's sitting at your table. I'll sit there and build the story with them. I'll take an hour of time to discuss like all of this stuff, and then we'll go into playing the game. Investing that time is worth it because you'll have a better game overall. Again, because it's collaborative. You've built this world together. You're now all invested in this world. You're all invested in this story.
Yeah.
So it's just something to keep in mind as well. If you're doing this for like in a similar, it sounds like it's a similar situation where everybody's coming to like a meetup and sitting at a table and playing a game. So
That's why I'm always a little bummed when I sit down at a table and there's pre-gens. And on one hand, I'm like, well, you know, if they just like crunch some numbers and they were like, look, we need a fighter, a wizard, a rogue, and a healer, right? Like, okay, I get it. You're playtesting, or like, this is your story, cool. Like, put the numbers on the sheet, but then let's answer questions about who these characters are.
Yeah.
That
Right.
like
Yeah.
still let your players do that. Like, don't
Right.
write that backstory stuff completely, because that's my favorite hour of a con game.
Yeah.
Is that first hour we're figuring out who all these characters are.
Right.
Like, I could almost just leave at the break. You know, like not because I'm not having fun, but like that's my favorite part, is that first hour, hour and a half.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are games that are very crunchy that do require a level of like pre-gens. Like I would never run a Cyberpunk Red game
Sure.
without
Yeah.
some kind of pre-gen.
Yeah,
in place.
Shadowrun.
Yeah,
I would bring
exactly.
some numbers on a page.
Yeah, numbers
And-
on a page for sure.
And then a Decima session.
Yeah.
Then it's Decima time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to, like one of my favorite things is world building. It's part of the reason I do this at all. But, so I like to do all of this stuff and then sit down with my players and figure out the nitty gritty. You know, so I like to have like, oh, this is like, this area is like musketeers and pirates and stuff like that. But like, who are you and what is, you know,
Oh,
boots
yeah.
on the ground version of
That reminds me. Hot tip for you as a GM. Everything that your players give you that is a part of their backstory, has just become your new weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot begin to tell you,
100%.
as soon as you take that little string of backstory, doesn't matter what it is, what aspect of it, the moment it pops up in game, the look of joy that is on my players' faces when especially in one shots, when you can do it in one shot.
Sure. Yeah.
Joy or fear? It's that it makes me happy when because that means my players are now even more invested in the game. Like, that's how I know they're having fun. We were playing Girl by Moonlight. And we had one character and it was we were Sailor Moon nerds, so we played the Outer Senshi theme when they all transformed except for one. And the moment that person was able to transform, because there's a character that can only transform if a specific condition is met. They met the condition and they transformed, and when they did, it's those little extra things that you do that get your player, that's what impresses your players, is little extra things that you can think of. In this case, one of my favorite songs is Birth of a Hero by Two Steps from Hell. And I played that song when they transformed, and the look on their face, they were so, so very happy about it.
That's fucking rad.
And it was just, we talked about pieces of their backstory would come out. Don't be afraid to use little pieces of it. You don't have to use all of it, but throwing in a thing that they go, hey, I'm familiar with that thing. Just it's worth it. It'll help you. That's a little thing for most GMs. You know?
It's also okay to it sounds like we're setting up a campaign here. There was a point that I'm gonna pat myself on. I don't know if this was useful to you, but I felt like I did a good job. I messaged Angie before one game where I was like, hey, I was planning on putting another Dallas in here. I don't want to spoil anything, but is this still fun for you to have that stressful thing, or is it good? Or is it played out and we're done with that chapter of your character story? And you indicated that it was good, and I don't think that made the moment worse.
I was still shocked and surprised.
Okay, just checking in. I didn't give all the details of when she was going to show up, but just, hey, would it be fun for me to push this button again, or are we done with that?
So 2 thoughts, one related to that, one related to something just happened in chat. But I want to say, you're saying we're talking about setting up a campaign, and I think you're right, but I also think her point is also valid for a one-shot. I think when you're building a one-shot, it's very easy to take things that characters have in their backstory and have it tie into that one-shot.
For sure.
Yeah, so I think that's fair. I want to point out that in the chat, Bumble True just offered to Rose to do a brainstorming session on mysteries, and I want to say that as someone who ran the Doctor Who RPG for 2 full seasons, it was completely very, very, very necessary for me to have a almost co-writer on that show with me, because I will say that GMing Doctor Who is very, very tough, because it's like running a Sherlock Holmes type mystery where it's you have to create a mystery that your players can solve, but you also have to make sure the player playing the Doctor can seem like the smartest person in the universe for solving it. So you can't make it too hard on them, but you also don't want to make it so easy that it's not fun for them to solve it.
Yeah.
And I had a co-producer, my friend Michael Nixon, who basically co-ran a lot. We would sit down together and we would hash out the episode together, and then I would still run it as the GM. He would just sound an engineer, but he was there and would help me play side NPCs. Not obviously you won't always have another GM with you at the table, but if you know you're coming up on something hey, I want to run a mystery, people, sit down with somebody and hash it out, because they can toss in ideas for red herrings. They can toss in something you might be missing in the design for it, or even it's just having someone to bounce ideas off of is almost like giving yourself a prompt.
Yeah.
It's valid. To build on your point, that is so valid. And especially if you're a new GM, don't be afraid if you know someone who's a more experienced GM who's been at it longer, to go and sit down with them. That reminds me of my own story, because my very first streamed game, I was GMing, and I was GMing for a group of all men and the name of the game was Oops All Paladins.
Oh, no.
So everybody was playing all Paladins for just so that everybody knows, every single one of them forgot the fact that they have Divine Smite and didn't use it in the first session. And I will never let them live that down. You're welcome. Don't even ask. I'm oh, okay. But anyway, so that wasn't the point. That's just a fun little
rogues
fact.
not knowing they have sneak attack.
Yeah.
What? Why did you make this?
You have one job.
That was the point. But long story short, I was terrified, because I was these are all paladins. They have all these things. They have auras. They have Divine Smite. What monster can I throw at them because they're all level 6, because they were all starting at level 6. They'll one-shot anything I throw at them. What do I do? So I went to my friend Jake, who also has a channel on Twitch called for Althaven, and I sat down with him because he's been GMing much longer than I have.
GM Jake.
Yeah, GM
Yeah,
Jake.
he's great.
Yep, GM Jake. I sat down with him and was like, hey, I need help. I really don't know what to do. I have a whole group of paladins, blah, blah, blah. What monsters can I throw at them? I really don't know, like, what's going to be a challenge for them, because I didn't want to kill them. I just wanted the fight to feel like they needed to put some effort in. And he was the one who helped me come up with 2 different hags, because the way hags attack is actually opposes the way paladins work in the game, and it did exactly that. It helped me create a challenging combat encounter for my players that they ultimately ended up really enjoying. And the whole forgetting to divine smite was just made it that
So
much
funny.
funnier.
Yeah.
But like that's kind of what I mean. Like when you go to someone, like they can go through the monster manual with you, help you find like a monster to build a mystery off of. Maybe like, oh, I'm not sure if I should do a werewolf or a vampire. Which one should I do?
A werepire.
Yeah, a werepire, maybe both, But that it's always valid to have like a person who's outside of the game to brainstorm with as well.
And sometimes somebody who's in the game to brainstorm with, because they
mole.
have the context.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my buddy, well, Brian,
Yes.
who is on Old Gate Adventures from 7 to 10 p.m. on Thursday nights.
This has become the new Decima of this
Yeah,
episode.
he's also my Wednesday night game that we started as a one shot in the pandemic and is now going for 4 years.
Yep.
And I'll just say like, hey, I was thinking about this thing, and we'll kind of bat some ideas around, and he's really good at acting surprised.
Yep.
Yep.
I was surprised. Were you surprised? I was
I was very surprised.
We should get to our next letter.
We should.
Yeah, perfect.
Ingy, were you gonna start that one?
I'll do it.
He is the radio personality.
Mailbag 2. Hello to you, merry mismanaged miscreants. My day job is an analyst of various types in an Evil Corp affiliate, Rise Corp. But over the years, I have found an odd affliction for studying various project management and organization tools. I also just listened to the live con show where you talk about the 5th Conspiracy RPG with the creator. It rekindled my desire to talk about some things I think about when playing and running games. I may follow up with other ideas as they come to me. The agility needed to climb a waterfall.
Oh Lord.
There are 2 major thoughts in software development, and both can be right depending on the needs of the project. Waterfall is a list of steps that must be completed in order to accomplish a goal. This is considered a bit more old school approach from traditional project management. Okay. Agile,
Oh, I get where okay.
at its most basic, can target the most actionable thing within a time frame toward a goal. And once that is completed, you can pick up the next most actionable thing. It is more flexibility to change on the fly.
These are like corporate organizational tools.
Yeah, corporate
Oh,
organization
So
tools. That's
agile
what
is like the
I'm
name of a product and tactic for organizing stuff in your corporate
Yeah.
world.
Okay.
Cool.
Whoosh.
This is
Yeah.
corporate
Yeah.
talk.
I'm here to help. I can translate.
Now that all the other PM nerds are yelling at me that I am wrong, I think these 2 ways of planning are fundamentally why heroes tend to beat villains in stories. Look at Sauron's planning versus the Fellowship's. Sauron has a massive plan with armies in place and years in planning and execution. However, if one of those parts is delayed, say the reacquisition of a certain circular resource, everything downstream gets
That's
mucked
precious.
up. The Fellowship starts with the assembly of a team and a mission goal. Keep it secret, keep it safe. They do some fact-finding, and when part of the team splits off to do one thing, the rest of the team picks up some new goals that support them. When something fails, they can pivot to some other plan. Fundamentally, having a goal, then trying things to accomplish that feels haphazard. But I think it is the more optimal strategy in this case. The number of times we have tripped up a GM, or I as the GM have been tripped up, not because the PCs had some great plan, but because they disrupted my MacGuffin generation. Much of the time, they were just doing the thing directly in front of them. In my opinion, I think the nature of dastardly plans are at a strategic disadvantage to players just grasping at the thing they can do next to accomplish their goals. Thanks for being amazing, all, especially Ingy. Oh, that's nice.
Oh, it's nice.
Where's that?
Yeah, I don't even think he knows who I am.
Editorializing here.
Only on English sheets.
What?
Byron in Bureaucracy, JD Grizz in the Discord.
Yep.
That's a good point, because it sums up for me why I get frustrated in stories when there's the villain that can think like 5 steps ahead of the heroes no matter what they do. Like, my Star Wars friends are getting mad at me for this, but it's what drives me bonkers about Thrawn is like Thrawn always. It's like the writers gave Thrawn the script ahead of time, so he knows what's going to be happening. It works for the most part, but there's sometimes I'm like, there's no way he would have known that was going to happen. And like, yeah, it's so I think that I like that analysis of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's you have to put that up against a character like Sherlock Holmes, who has to be portrayed as the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
You know, where he is seeing every little clue in this hanging thread and whatever. But like Sherlock Holmes doesn't work in an adventuring party.
Right.
You know,
No.
like he doesn't even really work as an improv character. Like he is a novelized character, and that's only, or in a movie, right?
Yeah.
That's the only way that main character energy is gonna go anywhere.
Yeah.
Versus like trying to have a flock of players all going in the same direction and feel like they're doing something productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be part of a team.
Moriarty works as a villain in a Sherlock Holmes story because the same writer is writing Moriarty as
Yes.
writing. Again, going back to the Doctor Who thing, that was the thing. I played the Doctor and then I ran the Doctor, and they both were very hard because you're playing or running a role that normally is done by the same person at the writing stage. And so it's easy for writers of Sherlock Holmes or writers of the Doctor to make them incredibly smart because they also wrote the problem.
Yes.
But it's very hard as a player to. That's why systems like Forge in the Dark have their flashback system the way they do,
Right.
which is great because the players don't really have the ability to fully like scan out an entire heist because it's all being made up as we go. That's why it's like, we're gonna build in a system where, of course, they planned this before.
Well, and
without having to sit down and do
it's
it.
like what Angie was suggesting earlier. Any scripted narrative starts with, okay, so this vampire killed a guy.
Yeah.
What are we going to leave behind? Oh, puncture wounds on the neck. Okay, cool. What else? And he's got no blood in him. Okay, where was he killed? Oh, is that this nightclub?
Here's
Right.
the beginning.
Right.
This
Yeah.
is literally how I write a TV episode or a movie is, okay, here's my beginning, but to know the story from here to there, I need to know the end.
Right.
And then I work backwards through it. And then you work your way forward, and then you work your way backward again, and you just keep
Right.
linking things.
And that
but, like,
only
you can't
works.
do that on the fly.
Yeah, that's only for scripted. You know, like it just doesn't work at an improv table where whether you're on a stream or not, even at home, a home game, like you need the flexibility to kind of like go wherever the story goes and see what happens. Also, I would say, but especially if you're running a new group of players and you're like trying to figure out how to like agile or waterfall or whatever it is you're trying to do to solve a problem, if you're a new GM or they're new players or both, don't be afraid to say like, hey guys, I don't have a solution for that. Like, don't go all the way down that road. I don't have anything for it. That's nothing. Like, give them that. I will never forget or forgive the GM who let us search. Like, we got on a ship and sailed to the wrong part of the world because we didn't understand his clever fucking clue that we had read this little poem. We're like, well, it seems like we have to sail east. And nope. And he just was so pleased when he got to reveal that you've been going the wrong directions for 8 hours of game
that's
time
so stupid.
and days and
Terrible.
days of our character lives.
Yeah.
I'm like,
the day that
I'm
I
so
actually
smart.
had a GM, like back in our Champions days, who just went like, okay, guys, you've been talking about this for like 20 minutes. I got to stop you because that's nothing. I didn't mean to shine
Right.
a light on
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Like, we can move on from that. And we were all like really invested in this thing. And we were like, oh, okay. And tore ourselves away and
Yeah.
went on the adventure.
Or the opposite, like you said earlier about not locking information behind a single NPC. It's like if the GM is going to give you a world where you can get on a ship and go around the world for something, then they have to put a solution at the end result of that ship ride. Like, either make it impossible for you to get on the ship, be like, oh, it's too stormy, I'll have to stay in town for another week. If you want to do it in character, not break character, fine. But if you want to do it and you like, if you want to go, okay, fine, I'll let you follow whatever thread you're going to follow. You have to then move your trackless dark ride to follow that thread. Because like when like my way of writing Doctor Who stories, because of that element of there's no way that I can think of every possible thing the Doctor's going to think about.
Yeah.
I always set out, and this kind of goes back to Rose's thing from the previous thing too. I always just planned what would happen if nobody got involved, and that's all the prep that I did.
Yeah.
This is what's going to happen, and then anything else that happens from the beginning of the story onward, I can improvise around, and I justify that as like, well, the villains also don't think someone's going to come along and disrupt their plans.
Right.
Like, no one thinks that some bumbling like murder hobos are going to break into their dungeon in the middle of their ritual and mess things up.
Right.
You know, so it's like so it's okay if you don't plan for every contingency the heroes are going to have, because your characters probably didn't either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's how I generally do my main prep. Is I will sit down and go like, if the heroes never showed up, what's the plan?
Yeah.
Right.
And this is what's going to happen here, like and how he's going to go about it. And I generally do that in a very loose way, but and so when things start going wrong, then like, what would this villain do? Be like, oh, well, we need to stop them. Send out the lieutenant. Oh, lieutenant got killed. Well, let's send the captain.
Who the fuck are these people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, it's like you're Darth Vader on the Death Star, and you're like, wait, Obi-Wan Kenobi's here? Wait.
Yeah, I saw that meme, yeah.
Force guy
It's
here?
so good.
Yeah, this guy killed my daughter? Yeah. Or like, another thing you can do is, like what I did on Monday when I ran Thirsty Lightsaber Lesbians, Thirsty Sword Lesbians Lightsabers. I don't know if I said that on camera earlier. I just wrote down, my notes were about this long. It was like a little thing, and all I did was I picked like 4 or 5 factions and what they wanted with the MacGuffin. And basically that's all I did, and I put the characters. I started them. I used the map of Galaxy's Edge, the planet of Batu, as my map, and I put everybody in the cantina, and then you meet in a tavern. But I did do questions. They knew who they were to each other. An explosion happened outside because someone tried to rob a shipment, and then from then on, it was just going to be they're going to run into these various factions, and they, as players, get to decide what they're going to do with those factions when they meet them, and who they're going to give the droid to at the end, and all that. And I'm bringing this up because it made me laugh because they mentioned the MacGuffin. The droid's name was M4G-F1.
Oh, that's very
I
good.
love that.
Did they get it?
They did eventually.
Okay.
Yeah.
When somebody wrote it down.
Yeah.
So I have a little story about exactly something similar to this, like how you organize things, and it has to do. I'm gonna name the game, and I want everyone to know that I don't hate this game. I was just a tiny bit frustrated by this aspect of the game. So there's a game called Cats of Cthulhu.
Uh-huh.
I love the concept. I love cats. I'm an old cat lady. Anything that has cats on it, I'm very excited by. And it's basically a comedy version of Cthulhu, but you're playing a cat. And the idea is that the cats know the stuff the humans aren't going to know, so it's their job to stop the Eldritch Horror because humans are too dumb to realize the Eldritch Horror is a thing.
I love it.
The part of the book that frustrated me is when I went to look for lore so I could start building my world, and the book very clearly states, if you would like to learn more about this world, you'll have to buy book 2. And I went, great. So, this happened to me while I was running a game. I had a table of players in front of me. We had just built characters, and I go, cool, I can build a world okay. So I basically I started my entire thing with a single sentence. How are these cats going to stop the Eldritch Horror? And I literally had to build the world around them. It was a total improv scenario. Like sometimes that's like, it's one of those, it's not flying, it's falling with style, but it goes right into this idea. Rather than having a list of steps to follow, I really had to let them make the choices and build the adventure around the choices that they were making. Just by virtue of not having the lore or the world in front of me. I was like, okay, think Lovecraft. I can think Lovecraft. Find tentacles. We're good.
I'm just now picturing the like live service subscription model RPG where you have to like subscribe for the next thing.
And buy the cat.
Don't say it out loud. Wizards will do it.
Unrelated to that, just the fact that it's the greatest cats-based game I've ever played is 9 Lives to Valhalla, which is by our friend of the show, Gemroom's game. Games. It's at gemroomgames.itch.io. 9 Lives to Valhalla, very fun and complete.
Already
for
getting it.
$9.
Yay!
Yeah.
So
Yes.
anyway, just a fun aside, had nothing to do with what you're
That'll
talking
be the
about.
next game I get. So the long story short is we came up with essentially these cats were all cats that were in New York, and the Eldritch Horror was gonna pop up in Times Square. So they had to and thankfully I had players that were from New York, so we pulled familiar landmarks, and we were able to build a really fun and engaging game that I literally had to pull out of nowhere. Sometimes that's just the way it is.
Hey, I'm taking over the world here.
Exactly.
Such a good sheet to pick a thing that people recognize and know physically. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because then, but like things like that help you kind of with that. And especially because the villain, like you said, to build on your point, the villain doesn't have to know everything. The villain has one goal, and it's to do the thing they set out to do. In the case of Cats of Cthulhu, the Eldritch Horror wants to destroy everything. Point A to point B. The cats are trying to stop it. And that's really, even that simple concept can be such a fun adventure for people. Sometimes less is more, I guess is what I would
Yeah.
say.
It's also okay if you get into a situation and you realize, oh shit, this guy does radiant damage. I did not think about that. This guy's going to take a lot of bonus damage from that. Like, that's okay. Let him win the big time. The first time the villain, like you said, the villain doesn't know who these people are.
Yeah.
And it was, in our superhero campaign, for the first half of the entire series, the bad guys didn't really know who you people were.
Yeah.
And then you got their attention. And you know what? Suddenly they were a little more prepared. And they had stuff that you couldn't necessarily go up against, or stuff that could last a little bit longer. And there was some shit going on. And let them win in the beginning. It's okay.
Yeah. There's so many superhero films where it's like Spider-Man movies where it's the first Spider-Man movie of this particular build of Spider-Man, and so someone doesn't know who Spider-Man is yet. Like, they haven't seen the Tobey Maguire films and the Andrew Garfield films. So when Tom Holland shows up, like, there's a new, who's this guy? Like, that's a thing. Like, that it's just what is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah. Apparently, according to James in the chat, there are 3 books for Cats of Cthulhu. They also, I'm sure all of them have at least one paragraph talking about the special cat dice that you can buy as part of the game.
Ooh. I'm a sucker for raccoon
Now-
games.
Yes.
Please put your whole game in your book. That's one thought. I was
Yeah.
playing.
Please,
I was
God.
running was a common, like, before it was common when it was just the OGL for 5e, and I was having people build their characters, and they got to the character creation page, and I couldn't figure out why someone was having a hard time building their character, and it turns out they had not repeated any of the character creation details from 5e. They only added their new versions of it, so people didn't
Awesome.
know how to actually, people who had not played 5e didn't know how to build their characters, but it's like, not everybody playing this game is playing 5e. Like, you have to put the standard rule stuff in here as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or at least a reference to it, something.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
throw us a bone, you know?
Kimmy did tell me I'm not allowed to keep these folks here all night, so
Aw.
We
Oh,
keep
man.
ourselves.
we're gonna have to head out here. Anything that we want to plug before we head out? Before we say goodbye? Yeah, got enough out of you. Old Gate Adventures, Thursday night from 6 p.m. to 10.
So every
seven,
Thursday
ten.
night, so every Thursday night, no. I'm also in that game. So.
Okay.
But yes, I guess.
Fantastic in that game.
Thanks. What do I have? I don't know. Don't
Okay.
start with me.
Okay.
I'll go last.
I have mentioned my Doctor Who thing a lot, but I'll go ahead and say the actual name of the show. It's the Game of Rassilon, and we actually just completed our entire 5-year campaign with it. So we finished it. We did my full seasons. We did a bonus episode at the end of it, and we're dropping some end of show BTS things now. But that is a completed campaign. There were 3 years where I'm the Doctor, and then I regenerated and became the GM, and there's another player playing the Doctor, and our old
That's a
GM is the
great
companion.
concept.
Nice.
It's very fun,
Oh, that's
and
great.
I'm really proud of it. And it's a fun 5-year game, and it's really fun to hear how 2 different people, not unlike Russell T Davies handing it off to Stephen Moffat, like, oh, people do the show differently,
Yeah.
and like, not unlike that, the 3 years that Russell did were great, and then the Moffat years were contentious, and that's how my run is. No, but yeah, and I'm really proud of how we ended it. I had a lot of fun. I got to tell my versions of how I would do things if I was writing Doctor Who, and so I got to, like, really live out my fantasies with it. We are launching a new show using Scum and Villainy later this year.
Cool.
We have not yet done Session 0 or Mesh sessions for it yet, but I'm excited for that. We love doing Doctor Who. It was very fun, but we are at a point now we want to tell our own stories and use our own IP, so we're creating a game around that using Scum and Villainy as a system. But yeah, it's been a fun ride, so check that out. And yeah, it's fun to say you can listen to the entirety of a show.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. I am going to plug Dungeoneer, which is my TTRPG advice show. Episode 5 comes out tomorrow. It's on YouTube at Dungeoneer Show.
Shit.
Really
I've
use
only listened to 3.
subscribers.
There's 4 out already?
You give
Or
you
out.
give RPG
Yes.
advice?
Yeah, on occasion.
You saw-
And it's a comedy show, so
It's also like
funnier
edited
than
and
here.
tight and really fun, and you should go watch it.
Yes.
I'm not being sarcastic. Like it's actually really fun.
one of my friends is like, I don't play D&D. I have like no interest in it, and never have. Anytime anybody tries to explain it to me, my eyes cross, and she's like, I've watched your videos multiple times because they're just fun.
Because they're fun.
Yep.
Anyway,
Alright.
I'm ready now. So you can find me over at the Pocket Dragon Pub, where we do a lot of actual play games, and we also have a show called Wheel or Woe. Yes, it is named after the spell, where we review other TTRPG games. And it's less of a review and more of like, hey, look, there's more to life than a D20. And we're trying to like talk to people about different games you can play. And our latest episode, we actually talk about different fantasy games that people can try, just as alternatives to Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, to see if they like them and have fun. We just finished a game of Symbaroum as well, which was very fun. Mitch Bustillos was our GM, and we actually went with his module that he wrote. It's called Rite of Passage. If you're familiar with Symbaroum, it focuses around the adventures of the Ambrians. For this particular module is different because it focuses on the adventures of the Barbarians, which are one of their the races that are in opposition to them.
Oh, cool.
So it's a very cool module. It's available on YouTube. Wheel or Woe will air on Twitch, and then we will bring it up on YouTube as well. So find us there. And I'm also in a game of Cyberpunk Red. I play Bowie, a netrunner. Bowie like the knife, not the rock star. That group of ne'er-do-wells is also wrecking Night City at the moment over on Dinner and a Game, which is another channel here on Twitch. And I think that's everything that I'm doing right now.
My name's Jason. You can follow me on Twitch and Twitter and Blue Sky at It's Probably Okay. I stream video games and stuff on my channel sometimes. And I'm currently not in or running any games right now, but that will be rectified soon enough. And yeah, oh, and you can check out my game Demigods that came out. You can go to probablyokgames.com, home of the okayest games around.
Yay!
Thank you for joining us for Season 33, Episode 22 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. Please support our amazing indie designer of the month, Stephanie Bryant, she, her, and you can find her games at DriveThruRPG. Thank you to our chat mods, James V in particular, and
Alerting us that the episode name was wrong.
and our amazing Patreons who keep us free and independent. We don't have to do what anybody says.
Yeah.
happyjacks.org/Patreon if you want to give Kimmy money, and you should. She has put
Yes.
blood, sweat, and tears. I've seen it all in putting this studio together, and it is awesome to have this space.
Yes.
It's in a place where we actually care about the things we care about.
Labors
Love
of
you.
love cost a lot of money.
Yes,
And,
yes.
Yeah.
I'm Jason.
Yes, I'm Vixie.
I'm Angie.
And I'm Riley.
And we will be leaving you with the company of Captain Black, and that's it. That's the
By
end
the
of the song.
Poxy Boggers.
By the
By the Poxy Boggards.
Gotta remember that.
I know that band.
So enjoy a fun song, and we will see you next time. Bye.
At Tavern Inn we drink our ale, though the night be filled with a dark black veil. We stand as one, no foe will attack, as company of Captain Black.
From the ports of London to the shores of Spain, to Hispaniola to the silver train, to the sea so deep to distant lands, for glory we fight, for honor we stand.
Our ship set sail in 83 with 40 men in our company. Our hold was filled with powder and shot, for Spanish and Dutch we'd sink the lot.
From the ports of London to the shores of Spain, to Hispaniola to the silver train, to the sea so deep to distant lands, for glory we fight, for honor we stand.
5 feet south from port were we, from bow and stern we saw but sea. Mutiny rose, Black took a stand, that was when we spotted land.
of Her Majesty, Elizabeth, Queen of England.
God save the Queen! Are you daft, man? You're in Scotland!
Back on the boats, boys. Back on the boats.
From the ports of London to the shores of Spain, to Hispaniola to the silver train, the sea so deep to distant lands, for glory we fight, for honor we stand. So south and west our sails did fly, with their charms to London for resupply. Our ship was sunk by wave and gale, so here we sit and drink our ale. From the ports of London to the shores of Spain, to Hispaniola to the silver train, the sea so deep to